So welcome to the Impactful OD series. My name is Nick Richmond. I'm a director of Tricordant. This series is a partnership between Tricordant and AI Change Management. And I'm joined by our partners, Peter Lawrence, who's MD of AI Change Management, and one of his team, Sati Misra, and of course, one of my team members, Sarah Amies. So Tricordant and AI Change Management have been working together over the past year or so, and we've been supporting the development of organizations' design and development capability within the public sector. And following feedback from this work, but also our own OD community, we've identified several operational challenges which senior leaders see having a real impact on their organizations. And these leaders have high expectations of the OD and HR practitioners to support these challenges. So we've developed an initial series of 3 webinars to explore these topics. The first one today, designing for inclusion, diversity, and equality. The next one is on the 28th of February, and that's on intelligent cost reduction. And then the third one on the 28th of March around organizational agility and normalizing change. It's great to have you all, and thank you so much for making the time to join us. Today's agenda, as you can see, we started into the welcome already, and in a moment, I'm going to ask you a poll question, and then we're going to hand over to Peter and Sati, who are going to provoke you with some thinking around the research that they've done. There'll be time to process together in small groups around that research, and then into plenary to share our own experiences and thoughts and practices. And we'll have a short summary and close at the end with a bit of an evaluation, because what we really want to be able to do is to constantly improve these webinars. So we would love your feedback towards the end with the evaluation. A few of the house rules just for a moment. As ever in these webinars, if you can keep yourself on mute while the presenters are speaking, but equally when there's an opportunity to chat in small groups or in plenary, by all means come off mute. Raise your hand in the plenary so we can see who wants to come in and share something. The chat is available for you to share thoughts, experiences, questions. We'll try and monitor that all the way through as well. So before we get into the provocation, we'd like to share an offer. So this is the Impactful OD Masterclass series that we're going to be building upon from this free webinar series. These masterclasses will deep dive into each of the 3 topics to develop OD teams and leaders' confidence, capability, and credibility to have real impact. This is about maximizing the value of HR and OD functions within your organization's perspective. And of course, the hope is that by the end of that masterclass series, you'd have an action plan to apply into your organization that will have real impact, but you'll have grown as a practitioner and as a leader yourself. So each topic will be 9 hours long, composed of 3 by 3 hour sessions. And the series will be delivered virtually between 2 p.m. and 5 p.m. on those dates, as you can see there. And of course, there are early bird tickets available until the 15th of March. After that, they'll go up to full price. We'll send out the link to this series at the end of today, and at the end of each of the free webinar sessions, of course. So before we get into it, we've still got one more poll to launch, which I'd like to do now. The poll's going to ask you, what are you expecting to find out about or experience from today's session? It's a multiple choice, so you can select one or more answers. And I'm just, is that one? There it is. So I'm just going to launch that. And if people can respond to that, that'll be really useful, please. Everyone's had a chance to answer and everyone's answered. Fantastic. So let me end that and then share some results. So hopefully everyone can see those results. So as you can see there, digestible insights, very much people are up for that. They want that, to be inspired to try something out, learning a new tool and approach, and then of course links to further resources. So it's really about grappling with the issue, being inspired to try something out, and maybe learning a new tool. So that's really great. Thank you so much for that. So I'm just going to stop sharing for a moment, and then my my partners, Peter and Sati, are going to share their screen.
Fantastic. So welcome, folks. Thanks so much for joining us today. My name is Pete Lawrence. I'm the director of AI change management. You may just see in the frosted glass behind us, we're in the office today, and this is my colleague Sati. She's going to do most of the work in the next 10 or 15 minutes. Our OD practice is built on the assumptions of appreciative inquiry, which is the AI in our name, just in case you're getting confused with artificial intelligence or other sort of things that AI can stand for. So we basically work on the basis of what works well here, and we build most of our work on the 8 assumptions of appreciative inquiry. Just a quick sort of playback. It's about 2 years ago, we get interns from the University of Liverpool each year. And 2 years ago, we got Abby and Jody, did a 10-week research program for us. And we asked the question, is it possible to design inclusion into a human system? And they gave us a really good report, and Sati can tell you how to access that report. And then last year, Juno and Glory continued the research when we explored the question, so how do we do it? So the first research question won on a European award, and so we got some great insight from Glory and Juno, the latest 2 interns, around this whole question of yes, it is possible, but how do we actually go about doing it? And that's what we'd like to share today, really, is how we're doing it. And Sati's working with the client at the moment in real time, sort of really testing that out and sort of trying to understand how we actually get we can design inclusion into a human system. We also had an interesting conversation yesterday with the Heseltine Institute, who work in Liverpool, who are also exploring this question about sort of inclusion in the wider human system. So they've asked us to comment on designing in inclusion, which we find really fascinating and quite a privilege to do that. So what's going to happen now is that Sati's going to share our findings. We see this as ongoing exploration. So what you can share with us today is powerful, because we can add that to our research and we can continue the conversation with our OD Network Europe colleagues and also EODF colleagues as we progress. And then we're going to give you the opportunity to discuss in small groups, and then have an opportunity to feedback. Please put stuff in the chat if you've got any questions as we go. But I'm going to hand over to Sati now, who can introduce herself and give you a bit more of the research and the findings and the work that we're doing at the moment. So thank you, and over to Sati. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Welcome everybody, and thank you for joining us today. I'm not going to go into too much detail about each of the findings, but we will send you links to both of the research reports that are available on our website under the research with us section. We'll also have those sent to you as follow-up following the session today as well. What I'd like to do, so the next 2 slides really are an introduction, some background to the 2 pieces of research that were undertaken by the students at the University of Liverpool. And what I really want to do is just at a very high level to go through the 7 thematic areas that were identified as areas to consider when designing in diversity, equality and inclusion. Those are impacted. So probably no surprise to anyone, it's the leadership commitment to action. And this is really about not only getting the buy-in, but looking at inclusive leadership and how leadership are modeling the behaviors that are required to create the change within an organization. Secondly, the finding resulted around the definition of what diversity, equality and inclusion mean. Often it's used as a catch-all term, but actually as an organization you need to really explore, discuss and define what each individual term means to you as an organization, to really create a shared language around what that means, not just a generic textbook definition of each of those, but looking within the organization, what does that mean to you as an organization? Because that really helps with the cultural change that's required when trying to implement the practices around this. Thirdly, it's the whole system focus. So it's looking beyond just the people processes of recruitment and hiring in, but it's actually to identify what the practices are in the wider organization, and exploring what they how they would be impacted if the organisation was more inclusive, equitable, and diverse. As an organisation, it's not just about recruitment and identifying champions to progress EDI. It's everybody's responsibility. One of the key things that has really come out of both pieces of research is training and storytelling. Training, a lot of the people who participated really said that training just hasn't been sufficient. It's a tick box, it's an add-on. It's not really getting to the core of what the organisation is trying to achieve. So storytelling is one of the key elements which has come out, and this is about really reflecting the authentic experiences of everybody in the organisation. And you know, as it says on the side, they're using the statement, this is a place where, and what we've done with one of the clients we're working with is that's formed the basis of the cultural audit with them. Fifthly, an organisation assessment needs to be carried out to understand what is known and what the as is. And I think that again really aligns back to Peter's point about appreciative inquiry. We start on the basis that, you know, not everything is broken here, and we are doing things well. And I think it's identifying those and then building on those to move forward, and really helping the process and the journey of implementing practices within EDI is having the voice of those in the room and those impacted. So helping people helping co-create the future. They have more confidence in the journey if they understand what the current status is and, you know, their part in it as well, and how they can help the organisation. And finally, it's around engaging with the wider community and the wider system in which the organisation operates. So it's thinking about those who are exploring the same issues within your city or your town or your community, and really thinking about how, as an organisation, as a system, we can move forward with EDI and the effective implementation and cultural change that's required. So the next slide really is distilling the research part 2. So we ask the question, how do we actually design equality, diversity, inclusion into a human system in a way which is sequential, intelligent, and intentional. And again, in this piece of research, it really identified some of the same areas and issues and challenges that organisations are having as the first piece of research. As an output from that, we looked at the work of Burke and Litwin, a causal model of performance and change, to help us really differentiate between the transformational and transactional aspects, which really framed the recommendations for the second part of our research. On the slide there, we have we've really split out the two separate factors and aspects from the model. But I suppose really central to that is, it's at the core of all of this, it's the leadership, purpose and culture which drive cultural change within the organisation. Each of the transactional aspects are important and need to be considered, but without having, as we said, going back to leadership, input, modelling, and really understanding what the culture is in the organisation, it's really not going to work. So you can have the scaffolding, but without having the people impact, it's not going to work. We're not going to get the desired result. So in addition to the work of the Burke and Litwin model, we as a practice used an approach for organisation design. So we look at, there's got to be a compelling reason for change. It's got to be a sequential process. It's got to be intentional, and it's got to be intelligent. So it's really got to be data-led, but also looking at particularly what is the data telling us to move on to the next step. As a result, we applied the concepts of the Burke-Litwin model and our approach and developed a model, sorry, just bring that up, on which we are using, sorry, I'm going to bring it all up and then we can. This is the model which we have developed to design for intentional inclusion. At the core of it is purpose, leadership and culture, and around it we have built in various aspects from an OD perspective. Now, whilst we're talking specifically about EDI here, this model can actually be used to design in any element into an organization. The key principles can be applied to any topic. So it's for us, it's been really useful in testing this with a current client at the moment. And we've really gone back to the start with the client about what is it that we're doing here? Why are we doing it? What's the case for change? Why are we doing it now? And, you know, looking at our stakeholders, who do we need to involve? Who has the interest and influence in what we're trying to do? And we've worked our way around this model. So looking at the here and now, so using the cultural web, you know, what's the culture, what's the storytelling like here? What are the policies and processes that are currently in place to really then identify what's missing? Following that round, we're looking at, you know, what are the design principles? What are the key processes and activities that form part of the current as-is process, and then looking to how we want the to-be process to look like. Again, following that round, so developing the options. So how could we do it? How are we going to do it? Building that operational framework, looking at the links and handoffs within the organization. Before we get to the start building, so what we found is that a lot of organizations often go straight to the, okay, let's start building it. Let's start putting the training in place. Let's, you know, build employee resource groups, but actually without going through this model, starting at why are we doing this as a core purpose, and who needs to do this? Who needs to be around the table? Building that model really won't work. So when we start building, we're looking at the culture metrics or the accountabilities frameworks, the rewards and skills and abilities that are required. And then finally going to the learning the lessons, you know, and making sure this is a process which, you know, it's constantly under review, because the nature of EDI is that it's constantly changing in terms of its requirements, what's needed, and the nature of work. So we really need to make sure this is a process that is followed, and lessons are learned as we go through. So this is a quote. If you don't purposely, sorry, just bear with me. If you don't purposefully design management systems for justice, you're going to create systemic injustice in your organization. And we really need to think about how to design more just systems, and crucially, how to become the inclusive leader and colleague you want to be. So this is a quote from a book by Ruchika Tulshyan, and she really focuses on what are we missing? We have the desire, we understand why, we understand the business case, we understand the moral case for doing this, but why are we not doing it? And her book really talks about, we fail to understand that we've got to create awareness around this. It's not a process that's going to happen overnight. It's about running with it, trialing things, and making sure that we're really listening to the people in the organization about what needs to be done to help them feel more included in the organization. And it's not just about ticking the boxes by recruiting more diverse looking or feeling team, but it's really about what are we doing at the moment to create the systems and understanding what's happening in our organization. And so I'm going to hand back over to Peter.
Okay.
For our small group discussion.
Well, thanks, Sati. That was a very quick run through about sort of the work that we've done so far and the work that's continuing. And all of those have a story behind them. So each of those first 7 findings from the initial research have stories behind them, which I'd love to tell you more. But also this idea of a model that we can actually apply with our client in Liverpool that we're taking through and learning a lot from them. And we're doing that in real time. So the model that Sati shared with you, we're actually working that round with our client. And the next phase we're doing with them will be some action learning. And one of the things we looked at was external environment. So that client is going to invite in different partners from the city system to do some action learning with them. So it's quite a powerful way of not just looking at your own organization, but sort of thinking about the wider context, because our client may be that sort of inclusive employer, but they're thinking now wider of their impact on the place. And that's another thing that we're thinking about, is place-based thinking, and how our influence of our organization development design expertise can actually spread wider into a system. So that's interesting, and it's challenging, and it's fun, and it's good stuff. So
just to add on to that, I suppose one of the key things that has come out of the work with the client is, I think I mentioned it, but having the right people leading that change as well. So it's not necessarily always the most senior person in the organization, but having representation at every level. And, you know, I mean, this particular organization has taken a bit of a chance, and they've said, okay, we believe we have a role in the city as an anchor organization, so we can really set the way in how we think EDI should look and feel. But one of the key realizations for them was, as we worked through the model, was that actually it's a process. It's not about, as I said, just ticking boxes and delivering training, but it really is looking at deep issues around culture and inclusion. So a lot of the work that we've done with them has been around appreciative inquiry and helping them understand where they are and what they're doing well, and what needs improvement. When speaking to the CEO, he'd said that, I expected that it would just be sort of recommendations that would come out, and we would implement them. But actually, as he's reflected on the process, it's been very much about, okay, we need to look at us as an organization, but individually our part in making this a more inclusive organization. Prior to bringing new people in, how do we make sure that the people that are working here at the moment feel included, and that we're doing everything we can to make it a more diverse, inclusive and cohesive organization for them.
So that's a story so far, and we're going to move in a moment into some small group discussion, and we'll put this this question in chat so you can have a look at that. Nick's going to split us up into groups, and what I'd like you to do in 15 minutes is just introduce yourselves, say hello, and then what we're looking at here is how can we move from the traditional transactional approaches to the transformational, to design inclusion into a human system. And we'd really like you to bring your own stories to this, your own experiences, your own examples, your own sort of take on it. And one of the things I posted something on LinkedIn last week is that I went to a conference and I got my coffee, and I just wasn't included in the whole system. And I don't know if you've had that feeling when you've been in a space and there's just no way that you're going to get into it, and that sort of feeling of sort of being on the outside looking in. I can share those stories with you, but it's how do we actually get beyond the rhetoric and the theory and into the practice and the experience of really belonging in a human system. So we're going to go into small groups now. Nick is going to do that. And then we'll have, is it 20 minutes, Nick? Can we do 20 minutes? Yeah. So we're going to move from the 15 to 20 minutes. And if somebody could be prepared in the group just to make a few notes, so that when we come back into plenary in 20 minutes time, I'm just going to go around the rooms and say, what's your experiences, what's your practical examples, what can you share? That would be really, really powerful and to add to the conversation. So are we okay, Nick, to do that now? Is that good? Thank you. Yeah, so we're just going to have 15 minutes or so just sharing around the room. And so the way we're going to do this, if you can just maybe show a hand and unmute yourself, and then I'll call your name out, and then if you can speak and share your insight. And please keep putting stuff into chat if there's anything. So Maggie, yeah, we've got you first.
Oh.
Yeah. You're first off the mark.
I was just trying to find the hand.
Maggie, you found it.
Thank you. Thank you, Peter, and Safi. Thank you both for your presentation. It was really helpful and really useful, thoughtful, and interesting. And so I was in group 3, and we we were reflecting on a couple of things really. One is really the power of sort of creating spaces for people to be human, and how do we role model that and enable that to happen? We were talking about psychological safety, but really enabling that to happen in a sort of a truly authentic way. And then we had this brilliant conversation around how can we walk in other people's shoes, or what does it feel like to walk in other people's shoes? And we were sharing some examples of using some videos and some sort of tech that might enable that to happen, or some resources. So thank you. It was a really useful conversation.
Excellent. Thanks, Maggie. And while you were chatting, that's something we were chatting through with Nick about. This client that we're working with is about Sati working with them. They had the first workshop together, and it was quite, oh, I'm not sure, can I say this? And then the well, you tell them about the storyboard, the board in the office.
Yeah. So I mean, when we look at EDI and what needs to be done to create the change, obviously it depends on the nature, scale and complexity of your organization. The organization I'm working with is about 15 or 16 people, and we have to separate into two sections. So one is a team which works in the outdoors, and there's another team which works in the office. Now, the feedback was that we feel like, you know, that we're like a family, we're one team, but there's a disconnect in us understanding what each side of the business does and how we can contribute to what one another are doing, or, you know, we're only called upon when we're asked to do something. And going back to the point around storytelling and communication, one of the simplest kind of actions that came out of it was, you know, we just need to understand what everyone is doing in the organization. So they put up a physical notice board in the office to share stories, to share what's happening in other parts of the organization. And a step on from that, they've now decided that they are going to have regular team catch-ups, so everyone's in the room together. They've got representatives from different parts of the business in the various meetings to really then feed back to the parts of the organization. And I think, you know, that has been a really powerful, it seems quite a simple thing to have done, but actually it's been really powerful for them in creating that cohesiveness. And I think, you know, that they're really using that as a stepping stone to build on that. And again, today they've just had somebody from their marketing team do a day in the life of a street ranger, and they've posted that on LinkedIn. And again, I think that just helps them connect as people in an organization, and really understand what is it that, you know, when we're making decisions in the office, how does it impact those who are actually having to carry it out as an action and as a service for the public.
And we think that's quite normal, you know, why doesn't that happen normally? But I think one of the things we noticed was it was a very intentional thing that the organization recognized and did. So this idea of intentionality, you know, as you say, Maggie, it's actually, so let's make this happen. How do you make this happen? And Bill, who's the CEO, said, yeah, let's do this. And something very simple has created much more open conversations. And yeah, so thank you for that. And it's something that reinforces our understanding about the whole system. So Ben, you've got your hand up, and we'll take more after Ben. So over to you, Ben. Thank you.
Yeah, apologies for not having my camera on it. It's doing some weird exorcist-like distortions. It's very interesting.
Oh, switch it on. Let's have a look.
But
Yeah.
let's see if it's doing it now.
No, go ahead, Ben. Yeah.
No, we're all right for a second.
Okay.
So we spoke about a couple of things. We kind of, there you go, there it's doing it now. We started talking about the differences between transactional and transformational aspects, and just a little bit of clarity around that. And what came out of that was ideas around the importance of inclusion being a golden thread, which runs through an organization, and that coming from leadership and being related to culture. And then we did go off on a really interesting and useful tangent, and we spoke about inclusion in the organization being kind of before and beyond the organization. So about relationships with the local community, whether that's establishing pipelines for employment, whether it's just making them aware that opportunities are there. We had a range of people from different professional areas. So we shared some great examples of outreach work from universities, some of the community work from the NHS, but also when you've got we've got private institutions as well. They can actually build relationships with local schools and provide opportunities for training and employment. So it was quite a big discussion, quite a big scope, but I love the idea of inclusion being about the community, just in and beyond an organisation.
Thanks, Ben. And that was something that they identified actually in this room when we had the first session together. They said, this is bigger than us. If this is going to happen, it needs to happen. And you know, we can, this was them talking, not us. They said, we can be the champions of this. We can actually, you know, start something here that could be a ripple effect out to the city, because in the city, we've got so many plans, you know, we've got plans galore. But there's still this sort of, this issue of, you know, we don't really feel we belong, etc., etc. So that pointed us to the transformational aspects, which is, you know, which is the culture, the leadership, and the purpose of the organization. But this idea of it spreading wider, and that's why we're fascinated with this idea of action learning there. So the client's going to bring in several of their partners, their people, and do some action learning, which we around inclusion, which we think would be fascinating. So Ben, thanks so much for that. We've got Helen. Good to see you, Helen. You've got the link, you're here.
I know, having technical issues. We had a few technical issues in our team as well, but Claire and I were talking about a bit about leadership and a little bit about, you know, how you make things move from the transactional to the transformational. So interestingly, both organisations that Claire and I work for have a female CEO, and we have a female CFO as well. And I do think that's changed the dynamic a little bit in terms of, you know, the sort of culture of the organisation and how that links to our purpose. I think the bit that I was just talking about was how I've really seen a change in terms of the storytelling aspect around things like learning. So we used to have quite dry learning that we used to complete. None of my learning colleagues are on here. In terms of, you know, that annual process of, you know, you go through and tick the box in terms of you've done your DE and I learning for the year or whatever. Whereas now we've moved much more to a storytelling type approach. So we have videos that people share as part of that, where they're sharing their lived experience in terms of what it feels like to be, you know, all sorts of different people and how they have that experience of working in our organisation, and beyond that bit about what it feels like to be bringing your best self to work and at home. So I think that's been a real change in terms of changing the culture and people's awareness too. So I just wanted to share that.
Thanks, Helen. That's really good. And one of the things we did with the initial research, we launched it with business leaders in the city, and I think they all rocked up to this event where they thought we were going to have rows and we were going to have a presentation and people are going to make notes and then have coffee and go home, and we decided just to mix it up a bit, and we had a circle of chairs, and we just did a goldfish bowl with them, and we invited them into the middle, and it was a bit messy, to be honest, because people weren't expecting that. And yeah, it was fascinating and there were a few people quite bruised by it as well, by, you know, what was being said and stuff. But just changing it from how we disseminate information is often, you know, a presenter, you know, talking at a group and going, you better get it or whatever, and having that idea of conversation and the stories that were being heard in the middle reflected on the outside and bringing in was powerful. We should have videoed it really. And they're saying we love that approach of just having a space where we can meet and hear other people's stories, but also get in the middle and share our stories as well. So that will feature. What Sati's doing is building almost a story of our experience with the clients, and that will feature heavily as a way of engaging. People want more now. They want to enter the conversation, not, you know, be part of it, not just have a chance to listen to it. So yeah, good spot, Helen. Thank you for that. Are there any other groups that haven't had a chance yet to feed back? There must be. Just put a hand up and we'll invite you in. If anyone made, no problem, Fiona, you take care. Good to see you. Okay. Any other rooms want to share something? Any insights? Just put a hand up and go for it. Oh, is there a hand? Oh, there's a hand. Oh, yes. Hi, Ruth.
Hello. I'll do it because Fiona contributed some really helpful insights into our
Good.
group. It's a shame she's actually had to go, as did others in the group. But we talked about some of the sort of like the practical aspects that you can use, like reverse mentoring, shadow boards, use of staff groups, so giving voices to different people in the network, and looking at how you can use that so that you're not always hearing the senior staff voices, but throughout the organization. A member of the group touched on their experiences of working in places where they feel marginalized. And so when looking at the numbers, how do you target, and what we looking at lessons learned at the end of each kind of period or cycle. I mean, I love appreciative inquiry, use that at work a lot. So we also talked about, because I am not a people team professional. I'm a different kind of senior leader. So how do we make this not something that is simply owned by people team? Because in so many organizations, it's simply owned by people team, and that's not good enough.
Absolutely, yeah.
And then just at the end, I threw in a bit of a curved ball about how do you do it in the context of recruitment, retention, and progression when your organization is fairly small and you have a fairly flat structure, so that really the only opportunities you have for developing people in the main are developing up and out rather than developing up and in.
Yeah.
And then it was 4 seconds to go, so we didn't
and then everything shut down. Yeah. Ruth, thank you so much. And that idea of it's we found as soon as you appoint someone to lead on this, that's their job, export it, and it does fall to people teams. Yeah. I'm just conscious of the time. James and then Kaz. Yeah.
Yeah, thanks, Peter. Hi, everyone. Yeah, we had quite a wide-ranging discussion. So I think I said for us, a lot of it is about reaching our senior leaders, but then that spun us off into, actually, it's not just about senior leaders, it's about reaching people at every level of the organization to actually make a difference. And sometimes right at the top of the organization, people seem to get it, but then there's a gap with other parts of the business. We talked about how sometimes organizations make inroads with one particular group. So I think we talked particularly about progress that have been made for women in one organization, but actually it's hard to focus on that and on other segments at the same time sometimes. And we talked a bit about just the importance of the language you use. So I think someone talks about moving away from kind of case studies of good practice to more just this really simple language of storytelling and having a conversation, and just how that makes a difference, just makes it more human. So those are some of the things we covered.
Yeah, fantastic. Thanks, Jay. And what we discovered with our client was this idea of intersectionality, that I may have 4 or 5 different characteristics, and if you just put me in one box, we're actually counterproductive of the purpose that we're seeking to achieve of including everybody. So that idea was resonates with us. Kaz, very quickly, let's move to you.
Hi, yeah, thank you. It's a real quickie because I didn't manage to benefit from the breakout group because I got pulled into something else.
Okay.
Just sod's law. But I just wanted to say one of the things that our EDI team have introduced recently, which has been really accessible for staff, is a series of micro-learning emails that just go out as a mail shot each week with a different theme each week. And there's nothing too big. There's nothing that looks like it's a lot to take in, but there'll be little videos, there'll be little bits of, some of it's written information, some of it's articles, and some of it's just genuinely snippets of information. So there's been a lot. This last week was on the Chinese New Year and the other cultures that have different New Year dates during the course of January and the next few months. And because it is just little bits, it's really interesting. I mean, it starts a conversation. Those kind of water cooler moments that we've been missing out on for the last 2 years, it's kind of started generating some of those again, which has made things, I think, more accessible, and people feel able to just go, what does that mean? What is that? What does that feel like? What does that look like? Which I think is that human bit that you were talking about at the start, which has been a good way in.
Absolutely. Yeah. And it is that whole sort of humanity and sort of who we are and how we behave and stuff like that.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And just, I mean, and reflecting on the work with the client, that's one of the key things that has come out of the work, is that it's okay to make a mistake as well, because it's an opportunity
Yeah.
from one another.
Yeah.
And I think, again, going back to it's psychological safety, yes, but it's okay to say, I don't understand this. And I think, you know, leading on from a few comments that have been made, again, it's about you know, reflecting inwards before you look to fix the problem outwards. So, you know, how do we recognize the diversity that actually exists within the team, not just visible diversity, the things that people aren't telling us. So how do you create the conversations so people feel safe enough to say, okay, I learn, or I think, or I communicate in a different way. And then, you know, and then I think that naturally feeds into how you are perceived as an organization or as an employer to bring new people in, and naturally leads to a more diverse and inclusive workplace and workforce.
And the final piece of just noting something that James said, and then I'm going to pass back to Nick, was that when we got the teams together, a street ranger, so these are people who are sort of operating this central business district of Liverpool, he did us a very short, powerful one-pager of his thoughts, which was absolutely brilliant. And so we invited him to the OD Network Europe conference in Chester, and he spoke to sort of share his insights. And you just wouldn't, it was just amazing just to see him, because people, oh well, he's a street ranger, he's, you know, he clears graffiti off the doors and stuff, but he brought himself so into the center and brought the whole sort of thing around it, and he's well respected. And so he's not your senior leader, he's your deliverer, he's your operative, if you like. So having him in the space was just fantastic, and that release of his energy into it was one of those takeaways that you go, wow, that was great. So folks, thanks so much for all of your feedback. Nick, I'm going to pass back to you now, and you can take us on from here. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Peter. So you should be able to see on the screen, hopefully, the slide that I've got up there, just as a reminder of the 2 other webinars in this free webinar series around intelligent cost reduction, and then around organizational agility and normalizing change. Do come along to those. And then, of course, a reminder about the masterclass series to consider joining in those. And we've got the early bird tickets until the 15th of March. We'd love to have you come along to that. And the masterclass series, of course, is really about developing capability and developing insight, bringing in client voices, hopefully sharing some of the tools and technologies that we use that really help us in those particular topics. And so the whole point is about developing the confidence and capability and credibility with your colleagues to make a real impact within your organizations. And then if you've not seen it, I've just put into chat the link to the evaluation, whether you use that link or maybe just scan this QR code on screen with your phone and go to Menti. I'd love you to have a chance to respond to that